The version of Volcano you saw is what happens when Hollywood builds a street in Torrance, fills it with Milkshake Thickener, and calls it Los Angeles on fire.
I'm going down there. Get a team together.
Today, we're counting down 14 facts about Volcano. Stick around for number 1, because the film's own science advisor bit his lip and said nothing, and what he admitted afterward is the most honest review the movie ever got. 14. A real Mexican volcano inspired the entire film. The premise of Volcano, a volcano erupting without warning in a place that had no volcanic history, was not invented whole cloth. The film was directly inspired by the formation of Paricutin, a volcano that emerged in a Mexican cornfield in 1943. A farmer named Dionisio Pulido was working his field in the state of Michoacan when he noticed the ground cracking and smoke rising from a hole. Within a week, the volcano was hundreds of feet high. Within a year, it had buried 2 villages and reached nearly 1,400 feet. It was the first volcano in recorded history to be observed forming and growing from its very first moment. The film's character, Dr. Amy Barnes, references Paricutin explicitly, noting that there's no history of anything until it happens, and then there is. The movie used a real and verifiable geological event as its scientific foundation. Everything the production built on top of that foundation was considerably less grounded in reality, but the foundation itself was solid. 13. 2 studios fought a release date war, and Fox lost the battle between Volcano and Dante's Peak. Was not just a competition between 2 similar films. It was an active release date war between 2 major studios willing to play aggressive calendar games to reach audiences first. Universal announced Dante's Peak for March the 7th, 1997. Fox immediately claimed February 28th for Volcano. Universal countered by moving to February 7th. Fox, unwilling to start production on an accelerated schedule to hit that date, conceded and pushed Volcano back to April 25th, nearly 3 months after Dante's Peak. The studio that blinked first paid for it. Dante's Peak opened in 2,657 theaters, earned $18 million in its first weekend, and finished with $178 million worldwide. Volcano, arriving after the audience's appetite for volcano films had already been partially satisfied, grossed $122 million. Fox had intended to open first and own the conversation. Instead, it arrived late to a party that Pierce Brosnan and Linda Hamilton had already started. 12, the Wilshire Boulevard set, was one of the largest ever built in America. Rather than rely entirely on location shooting in Los Angeles, the production built an 80% scale replica of Wilshire Boulevard on a lot in Torrance, California. The set reconstructed the junction of Wilshire and Fairfax Avenues in enough detail that the production could demolish and destroy it freely without city permits, traffic shutdowns, or the limitations of a real working street. It was one of the largest studio sets constructed in the United States at the time. The set included the gold deco cylinder of the old May and Kerpro building, Johnny's Coffee Shop, and the distinctive architectural details of one of Los Angeles' most recognizable commercial corridors. The choice to rebuild rather than simply close the real boulevard reflected both the scale of the destruction the script required and the practical reality that you cannot pour simulated lava down an actual city street without consequences. The lava was coming either way. Better to do it in Torrance. 11. The lava was made of milkshake thickener. The lava flowing through the streets of Los Angeles and Volcano was not a digital creation or a conventional practical effect. It was primarily methyl cellulose, the same thickening agent used in fast food milkshakes to give them their viscosity and texture. The production needed a substance that moved slowly, held its shape convincingly under camera lights, could be dyed the right orange-red color, and was safe enough for crew to work around in large volumes. Methyl cellulose met every requirement. Hundreds of gallons of the material were prepared, heated, colored, and deployed across the Torrance set for the lava flow sequences. It moved exactly the way lava should move on screen. Thick, slow, implacable, consuming everything in its path. The ash that fell throughout the film was a different kind of practical ingenuity. It was made from ground newspaper. A movie about geological catastrophe was built from milkshake ingredients and recycled paper. 10 separate visual effects companies worked on the film. The visual effects in Volcano were not produced by a single facility. The production distributed the work across 10 separate digital effects companies, including VIFX, Digital Magic Company, Light Matters Inc., Pixel Envy, and Anatomorphex, with cinematographer and VFX supervisor Dale Edema and Matt Beck coordinating the output. Between digital imagery, physical miniatures, and traditional animation, more than 300 technicians worked on the effects sequences. The challenge was consistency, keeping the lava looking like the same substance across footage shot by different companies using different equipment and pipelines. The results were uneven enough that critics specifically noted moments where the back projection failed and the lava lost its visual credibility. Roger Ebert pointed out that firefighters in one scene were aiming their hoses into the middle of the lava flow rather than at its leading edge because the lava wasn't actually there to aim at. 10 companies, 300 technicians, and you could still tell where the real street ended and the set began. 9. Alan Silvestri composed. The score then was replaced. Alan Silvestri was hired to compose the score for Volcano. Silvestri was one of Hollywood's most reliable orchestral composers. He had written the music for the Back to the Future trilogy, Forrest Gump and The Fugitive, which starred Tommy Lee Jones. He completed work on the Volcano score, and it was recorded by the Hollywood Studio Symphony. Then the score was replaced. The finished film carries music by a different composer entirely. Silvestri's Volcano score was released on CD by Varese Sarabande as a standalone album, and has since developed a following among film score collectors, a complete orchestral work that audiences never heard in the theater. The reasons for their replacement were not made public. Silvestri has not discussed it at length. A finished score by a major Hollywood composer was recorded, paid for, reviewed, and then quietly set aside for something else. The album exists. The film it was made for used different music. 8. The science advisor bit his lip. Through the entire production, Volcano had a science advisor. He was a geologist brought on specifically to provide the production with accurate information about volcanic activity, underground lava flow, and the geological conditions that would need to exist for something like the film's premise to be possible. He was consulted, he gave his input, and then by his own admission, he bit his lip and kept quiet when the script ignored what he had told them. He later acknowledged publicly that a volcanic eruption of the kind depicted beneath the streets of Los Angeles, lava bombs firing through manhole covers, underground flows moving that rapidly through a built city environment, was not just scientifically questionable, but was, in geological terms, several million years away from being possible at that location if it ever happened at all. He stayed on the production. His credit appears in the film. The volcano that he had confirmed was impossible remained in the script. Some advisory roles are more advisory than others. 7. The film was nominated for a Razzie and lost to Con Air. Volcano received a Golden Raspberry Award nomination in 1997 for Worst Reckless Disregard for Human Life and Public Property, a category the Razzies introduced specifically to acknowledge films that destroyed things with particular enthusiasm and implausibility. The nomination recognized the film's commitment to incinerating Los Angeles landmarks, killing firefighters inside lava-covered trucks, and redirecting geological catastrophe through the streets of a major American city using concrete barriers and helicopter water drops. The film lost Con Air, the Nicolas Cage action thriller, in which a plane full of criminals crashes into Las Vegas, was deemed to have demonstrated a more thoroughgoing disregard for human life and property than anything Volcano had managed. A disaster movie that set the second most populated city in America on fire was out-razzied by a plane crash in Nevada. The lava wasn't reckless enough. The competition was fiercer than expected. 6. The La Brea tar pits were a real filming location. The La Brea tar pits, where the volcano erupts at the center of the film, were used as an actual production location rather than reconstructed on a soundstage. The pits, which sit on Wilshire Boulevard in the Miracle Mile district and contain the preserved remains of Pleistocene-era megafauna, are one of Los Angeles' most recognizable and genuinely ancient landmarks. Filming there gave the volcano's origin point a physical authenticity that no recreation could have matched. MacArthur Park, where the story's earliest warning signs appear, was also used as a real location. Cedars-Sinai Medical Center provided exterior filming access. The production moved through the actual geography of Los Angeles with enough the consistency that local audiences could track the lava's route block by block in real time. A film that was scientifically preposterous was shot in exactly the right places. The streets were real. The volcano was not. 5. There were 3 volcano films. In 1997, and nobody talks about the third. The public memory of 1997 volcanic cinema stops at 2. Dante's Peak in February and Volcano in April. There was a third. Between the 2 theatrical releases, ABC broadcast a television disaster movie called Volcano Fire on the Mountain. It starred Dan Cortese, a name that lands differently than Pierce Brosnan or Tommy Lee Jones. The ABC film aired in March, sandwiched between the 2 studio productions, attracting enough viewers to justify its existence and virtually no critical attention to justify remembering it. 3 Volcano productions in the same calendar year, all targeting essentially the same audience, released within weeks of each other. Hollywood had identified volcanic disaster as the genre of the moment and committed to it with the kind of thoroughness that tends to exhaust an audience faster than any single film could. By the time Volcano opened in April, the public had already watched lava destroy things twice. The third time was the one that cost $90 million. 4. Don Cheadle was already a recognized actor, taking a supporting role. By 1997, Don Cheadle had appeared in Devil in a Blue Dress, Boogie Nights, and Out of Sight, films that had established him as one of the most compelling screen presences of his generation. He took the supporting role of Emmett Reese, Mike Rourke's assistant director in Volcano anyway. The role didn't require the depth that Cheadle had demonstrated elsewhere, and critics noted that his talent outran his material in almost every scene. He was there, he was good, and the film gave him limited room to do what he was clearly capable of. His presence in the ensemble, alongside Tommy Lee Jones, Keith David, John Carroll Lynch, and Michael Rispoli, gave Volcano a cast that was better than its script deserved. 3 years after Volcano, Cheadle received his first Academy Award nomination for Traffic. The man who spent part of 1997 helping Tommy Lee Jones stop lava would spend part of 2001 being recognized by the Academy. The volcano didn't slow him down. 3. The film ended with Los Angeles' newest active volcano. Volcano does not end with the disaster fully resolved. The lava is redirected into the ocean, the immediate crisis is contained, the characters walk away. Then the epilogue arrives. A text card informs the audience that the volcano that formed at the La Brea tar pits has since been officially named Mount Wilshire, and that it remains active, not dormant, not neutralized, active. The city of Los Angeles spent the entire film fighting to survive a geological event, succeeded in redirecting the lava, suffered enormous casualties and infrastructure damage, and then simply resumed living alongside a functioning volcano named after the street it erupted on. No evacuation, no long-term geological remediation plan. The closing image is of ash still falling over the city. The film's final message is that Los Angeles survived its volcano, named it, and then went back to being Los Angeles. That is both a geologically absurd ending and a deeply accurate portrait of how the city actually functions in a crisis. 2. The screenplay was written by 2 first-time feature writers. The script for Volcano was written by Jerome Armstrong and Billy Ray, their first produced feature screenplay. Armstrong had not written a major studio film before. Billy Ray had not either. They were first-timers handed a $90 million disaster movie at a studio that needed it ready under competitive pressure from Universal's Dante's Peak production schedule. Ray later acknowledged in interviews that the film's thematic ambitions, using the lava as a metaphor for Los Angeles' social fissures, its racial divisions, its institutional failures, were probably more interesting in conception than in execution. The climax's moment where ash covers everyone's faces and a child observes that they all look the same received particular criticism for being heavy-handed. Ray agreed. It was Billy Ray's breakthrough into Hollywood anyway. He went on to write the screenplays for Shattered Glass, Breach, The Hunger Games, and Captain Phillips. His first film set a city on fire. His career survived it considerably better than Los Angeles did. 1. The science advisor said a real eruption was millions of years away. The most damning review Volcano ever received came from the man hired to make it accurate. The film's geological science advisor, brought on specifically to ground the volcanic premise in something defensible, later confirmed publicly that the scenario depicted in the film had no realistic scientific basis whatsoever. Not just improbable, not exaggerated for dramatic effect. He stated plainly that a genuine volcanic eruption of this type beneath the streets of Los Angeles was, geologically speaking, several million years in the future, if it were to occur at all. The tectonic conditions, the absence of a volcanic hotspot, the nature of the Los Angeles basin's geological structure, none of it supported what the film was depicting. He watched the script ignore his input, stayed on the production, took his credit, and described his experience as biting his lip. A $90 million disaster film about a volcano that its own science advisor confirmed was impossible. He bit his lip. The studio spent $90 million. The lava flowed regardless. A film built on Milkshake, Thickener, ground newspaper, a street in Torrance, and a geological event its own science advisor said wasn't coming for several million years. Which fact hit you hardest? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe for more deep dives into the disaster films that burned everything down and called it entertainment. Until next time.